Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. Wanted to create this video to kind of go over the 2021 special elections that will be occurring this year in the House to fill five vacancies at the moment that have opened up since the 2020 House elections. So obviously, we have in terms of like larger state elections, we have the regularly scheduled Virginia and New Jersey elections. But I wanted to focus on the five special elections that will be held. So you can see this list here, all this information provided via Wikipedia. We've got the Louisiana Second Congressional District, currently held by Cedric Richmond, or previously by Cedric Richmond, who joined the Biden administration. Louisiana's Fifth Congressional District, that was formerly held by the unfortunately lately passed Luke Letlow, who passed away due to COVID several weeks ago. We have New Mexico's First Congressional District, formerly held by Deb Haaland, who is resigning from her seat to become the Secretary of Interior of the Biden administration. We have Ohio's 11th Congressional District, currently held by Marcia Fudge, who will also be joining the Biden administration as the HUD Secretary. And lastly, the most recent vacancy is in Texas's 6th Congressional District, formerly held by Republican Ron Wright, who passed away 2 weeks ago due to COVID complications, unfortunately. So I wanted to kind of go through these elections kind of in as much of a sequential order by level of potential competitiveness. So, just to kind of kick us off, I'm going to pull up the map from 2020. As you can see, I guess starting in, I'm going to try to go from order of least competitive to potentially most competitive. We've got the second district here. Louisiana has a jungle primary, but you can pretty easily see here there's a heavily favored Democratic seat composed of many parts of New Orleans and the suburbs there. So it is a heavily Democratic district, unlikely to go to the Republicans. So I'm going to mark this one as safe Democrat. When it comes to the fifth district, this is going to be a safe Republican race. Louisiana District 5, pretty safe Republican district. It'll be heavily favored in the special election. And both of these special elections, just have it pulled up here, they will be occurring on March 20th. With a potential runoff on April 24th. So that'll be the case for both of these elections. Now moving on to Ohio's 11th district. Again, this is a pretty safe Democratic district composed largely of Cleveland and the surrounding area there. So it's heavily favored Democratic. Don't expect too many surprises there either. One thing I'll note is that in the case of these three elections, and all of them really, the main thing that I think it might be able to tell us a little bit is how much of these coalition shifts that we saw during the Trump administration will stay durable. Is the Republican in the case of all these districts, like, is the Republican candidate able to make any kind of inroads with Black voters? Are they able to keep up their extremely high margin in the case of Louisiana Fifths among rural voters there? And same thing kind of on the flip side with the Democrats, right? Are they able to make inroads in rural voters? Are they able to keep their extremely high level of roughly 85-point margins, 85 to 90-point margins among Black voters? Will they be able to continue that kind of moving forward to the midterm elections of 2022? Next, so this is where it starts to get a little bit more competitive. I wanted to talk about New Mexico's District 1. It's interesting. I'll say that this is definitely whereas the previous seats I said were solid seats for the Democrats or Republicans running in those House districts. I'll have to say this one's probably a safe seat for the Democrats. You know, I'd still say 99% chance it's going to go to the Dems, but the margins are going to be much closer. And one of the reasons I say this is, well, one, you can see here, we're looking at a 17-point margin versus versus a 80 plus margin in those other races. But when we look at the most recent presidential level election results, you can tell here that Trump ran probably a little bit better than most people were expecting in New Mexico, or about maybe what was expected. Running about, he ran about 9 points behind Biden, so about 4.5 percentage points to the left of the nation with regards to performance. But one of, I think, the more interesting stories was this Lujan Ronchetti race. I believe former senatorial candidate Ronchetti was a former meteorologist in one of the major news networks in New Mexico. And he ran a pretty competitive race. I mean, he was polling, pretty far behind, but managed to keep it to 6 points, which again, that's definitely a solid victory for the Democrats, but not as strong as you may have expected. And, that's largely due to, I would say, the overperformance you can see here in the first congressional district. A 22.6% margin in favor of Biden, but only 14.5% in favor of Lujan. So I think that, and you see these margins kind of replicated across the second and third congressional districts, but in particularly in this heavily suburban, urban congressional district centered around Albuquerque, you see a lot of outperformance by Ronchetti. So it'll be interesting to see. Granted, even in a to positive national environment for Republicans, there's still going to be a really difficult race to win, right? Because I mean, again, like 14.5% is still a large margin. But you could imagine under the right national factors, potentially a very strong Republican with strong ties to the area, moderate ability to appeal to, suburban, urban Latino voters. They could do well, especially if, maybe you wind up running against a very progressive, very extreme candidate on the Democrat side. Again, still a safe seat for the Dems, but, one that could be somewhat interesting. Yeah, so here's just, the Cook PVI index on New Mexico's first is D+7. So, definitely a decently strong leaning seat that has grown even more Democratic in the Trump era, but it'll be interesting to watch. Again, you can kind of see the breakdown here with Ronchetti doing solidly well for a Republican in New Mexico in this day and age. So now I wanted to talk about the congressional race in the Texas's 6th district. This is going to be probably the most interesting. So, and apologies here. Let's pop out and slightly rearrange some of these tabs. But, we're going to have this election here that'll be occurring by May 1st. To fill the 6th district. And, this is a more competitive seat. Again, I don't really necessarily think that this is going to be a close district per se, but I do think that under right factors, this could be a seat that goes to the Democrats. We see here the Cook PVI is in favor of Republicans +9. However, when you look at the presidential results, you see a huge shift going from 17 percentage points in favor of Romney to 12% in favor of Trump in 2016 to only 3% in favor of Trump in 2020. And that largely speaks to, the ability, in the suburbs around Tarrant County, Fort Worth, Dallas area have shifted strongly towards the Democrats, and that's seeing a lot of those margins narrow. So, again, former Representative Ron Wright performed solidly. In a Democratic wave year, he managed to hold on to his seat by, roughly 8 points here. In 2020, he managed to hold on to his seat by 9 points, outperforming Trump by roughly 3 percentage points. That's solid for a relatively suburban county, or sorry, congressional district. Looking in here, and let me see. So this is courtesy of Sabatos Crystal Ball, the University of Virginia Center of Politics. But you can really see here when looking at Tarrant versus Ellis and Navarro counties that comprise the 6th congressional district, that Trump really struggled in Tarrant County here in the suburbs, losing by a margin of about 11 percentage points. Granted, strongly, huge outperformance in the more rural counties of Ellis and Navarro that comprise, total roughly 30% of the congressional district that managed to carry him over the top. However, it's definitely indicative that of these kind of suburban shifts that, should they continue to endure in the post-Trump era, may make this this congressional district competitive, provided you have the right Democratic candidate, maybe the wrong Republican candidate, and whether or not these trends of rural counties going increasingly towards the Republicans and suburban ones increasingly towards Democrats, depending on the magnitude of those shifts, this could very well be a competitive race. So this is going to be the one that I'll definitely say is a, if our New Mexico district that we were discussing earlier, the first district, is a likely Dem seat. The previous ones were solid Dem or Republican seats. I'm going to mark this one as a lean Republican seat. As it stands right now, I would definitely peg the chances of a Republican candidate winning at around 80% plus. It's tough to say without any kind of generic polling data or specific polling for the seat, but it's definitely a potentially competitive seat. Again, kind of hopping in here, this doesn't separate out by congressional district, but you can see that in Tarrant County, Biden, fought him to, a draw, basically, carrying Tarrant County, which I believe is traditionally, despite having a large urban center in Fort Worth, has been a traditionally Republican stronghold in the state, at least in terms of, being one of the most populous, a high population center that tends to go to Republicans, and kind of an aberration to the norm of urban districts like neighboring Dallas that tends to, even before Trump, but especially now, go to Democrats. But, you can see here in Ellis County, Trump carried it by roughly a 34% margin, and even more so in even more rural Navarro County, where he managed to carry the district in excess of, I guess, 45 points or so. But, again, just kind of wanted to continue this, speak a little bit, putting kind of moving forward into the post-Trump era, and like maybe if traditional Republican ideals, traditional Republican candidates gain ground, someone in the mold of John Cornyn, right? Like he managed to outperform Trump by 5 points in Tarrant County, which in the case of these, when you're looking at these types of vote totals, considerable, right? We're talking a 50,000 vote in favor of Cornyn versus a 2,000 vote in favor of Biden, right? So we're talking roughly 52,000 votes, granted state level race, but going to Cornyn. Same thing in Ellis County, right? Slight you don't see as much. Again, this kind of goes to speaking the rural nature of these rural suburban nature of these counties that have favored Trump. But even here, still, like, we're talking 34 versus 37 point margin. Navarro County, we're talking about, what is that, 47 points in favor of Cornyn versus about, talking 44.5, if I'm doing the mental math all right. Yeah, basically the same though. So, basically what that tells me is that, if the Republicans manage to nominate someone in the mold of a, traditional Republican, they've got a better chance of carrying this particular congressional district than if they nominate someone more in the Trumpian fashion. It'll be interesting to see which way this race goes, because, I don't think that Senate, special elections, they don't, in my opinion, tell us a ton about what to expect in years down the line, but they can be an early flag for both parties, kind of where the wind is blowing and where their parties stand as they get ready for the midterm elections. I definitely think something that'll be more indicative are the scheduled 2021 elections in New Jersey and Virginia that will probably tell us a little bit more about how these coalitions are, changing, where Republicans are gaining strength and where Democrats are gaining strength, or on the flip, losing support. But right now, special elections, they're going to tell us some things, but when we're talking about, specific congressional districts, there's a lot of idiosyncratic factors that can make a candidate, shine in one congressional district, whereas, it doesn't necessarily tell us much about the trends. So, I think it's definitely important to look at these races, get a little bit of like where the winds are blowing as we get ready for the 2022 midterms. But they won't tell us necessarily everything. We'll want to kind of get the data as it comes in, make some loose general conclusions, and then I think really wait until, the Virginia and New Jersey elections, where we're able to, get some like hard data on, state, much larger sample sizes, that maybe we can use that in combination with generic House popular vote polling to get a real sense of where the country is and whether or not this is going to be a favorable environment for Republicans or Democrats, or an even national environment in 2022. So anyways, that's it for this video. Hope it was somewhat informative. And yes, please feel free to send any suggestions for videos my way. And thanks again for listening, guys. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Stay safe, stay warm, stay healthy. Have a good one. Bye.